Hello, everybody, and welcome to Positive Fandom. I am your host, Artem, and today I have the fortunate experience of having Catherine Cooke here on the channel today. We're going to be talking Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 1 spoilers. And I don't know about you, Catherine, but it's been almost 2 years that we've been waiting for another, season of The Mandalorian. And apparently, Filoni also says that it's 2 years since 2 years have passed. How could it be 2 years since Grogu was with Luke? Does it feel like 2 years to you?
Well, let's see. I know. Is that 2 years since season 2 or 2 years since Book of Boba Fett?
I think it's 2 years since he left Luke.
Left Luke? Okay. Because season 2 was over 2 years ago as well, because that ended in December 2020. And now here we are, March 2023. But it doesn't. I admit I was kind of perplexed by how this episode started, because there's given where we last left them in Book of Boba Fett, it seemed like it just picked up right afterwards. Like he left Tatooine from the climax of that episode and just went off to go check in on his friends. For them to say it's been 2 years, I'm like, well, what have you been doing that whole time? And you still have the Darksaber. I'm like, that's kind of like Bo-Katan didn't come for it during that time. It's like nothing happened. It's very odd. I don't think people would know that if they didn't know Filoni had already said that.
Yeah, and it's a good thing he said that, because I think a lot of people were curious about, oops, that's not the right one. I think a lot of people were curious about what time period we're at now, because I think, and as far as I'm concerned, Catherine, when they inserted Grogu and Mando into the Book of Boba Fett, I don't think that was their original plan. I think they decided to just pull those episodes, and that's what we would have seen at the beginning of season 3. And so, that was something they did rather quickly and rather, hurriedly, because they were desperate just to kind of uplift the Book of Boba Fett, which I think was not what they were hoping for. And of course, a very different type of show, only picked up until that episode where we saw Grogu with Luke, and of course Mando with Paz Vizsla and the Armorer. So it's very interesting in that sense that it kind of disrupt the timeline for me. I'm still trying to wrap my head around how that got inserted in there, but that's okay. I'm kind of not even going to worry about it too much, because there's a lot that's going on now with Grogu and Mando. And this is I always say it's Mando wishes and Grogu dreams here. We're seeing more Mandalorian style rituals, and of course we know that the Armor is still making these helmets, these Mandalorian helmets for Mandalorian. So that, at the very least, Catherine, is telling us that there's a lot of Mandalorian kids out there, and they feel it's important to continue. You remember when the compound was destroyed in the last place they were at? We didn't know if those kids made out. We didn't know anything that had happened to the younglings. And now we know that they are alive and thriving, and they're keeping these rituals out, and they're doing that. But while they were, this was kind of a celebratory thing. It's like you're pledging to keep this helmet on for your life. If you're one of the Watch Mandalorians, was the water monster overkill in this scene? And was Grogu and the Mandalorian destroying the water monster even more overkill for the scene?
Well, I was kind of surprised that happened. It seems the only reason it's there is to give Mando a little bit of goodwill with the Armorer, for her to even meet, because it feels like that scene just reiterates what was already established in season 2, and she says, you're no longer a Mandalorian, you have to go on this vision quest now. And when he goes back to her, it's kind of reiterating the same thing. So having the water monster there, it's like, okay, that's like your foot in the door, but it felt kind of odd, like you're interrupting this ceremony to have this big 50s sci-fi monster type moment. And once the fight kept dragging on for a bit, I'm like, okay, Mando's going to show up at some point here. So it's like, okay, he saved him.
But yeah, and it is kind of interesting, because he does show up. He talks to the Armorer. Honestly, I don't feel like he's done anything wrong. This is just my personal opinion. And hello, Tom Jr. Jackson. Hello, Thalia Meyer. And hello, El Profesoro. Hope you guys are all doing well out there. I don't feel like he did anything wrong. I think he made a choice. but he wants to be back in with the Watch. And I guess I shouldn't be surprised they raised him. This is what he knows. But clearly, even the Watch has changed, right, Catherine? I don't think they're hiding it like they could before. I don't think they can do that. We know in season 1, they kind of intimated that they used to go, the Mandalorians used to go out one at a time, or they used to kind of be very careful so that people wouldn't quite know how many was numbers. But now it feels like all eyes on the universe are on the Mandalorians. So much so that when Mando brings this, artifact, it's like a little chip of something that you might find in the ground with Mandalorian writing on it. He talks about how, well, look at this. Is it possible? He's just kind of entertaining the idea. Is it possible that Mandalore isn't poisoned? And you and I both know that those high radiation style weapons, a fusion reactor, those things are that's dangerous. It's incredibly dangerous now. It's probably incredibly dangerous then. Is it really possible that Mandalore was not destroyed by this fusion explosion or whatever it was, and it's something else? Because I have my theories. I think maybe they just said that to keep people away so they could harvest all that good Beskar. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's like Bo-Katan tells him later it was just a mine, and they invented stories to keep people away from it, and that's probably what it did. Like they hinted earlier that the stories are just there by the Empire to keep people away from the planet. Now, I can't remember. Did they show us before where he got that crystal in previous shows, or is that something just new?
I've never seen it before.
Okay, yeah, I kind of had to stop myself for a second. I'm like, wait a minute, did I forget something? Like, where did this come from? And it's like, because that's why he goes back to her, and it's like the armor just sort of blithely takes that as proof that because there's this one little crystal, that must mean the entire planet is crystallized. I'm like, hold on here, But the fact that she's no longer hiding out on that space station either, she's like, they're out on a beach granted, we're not really sure what planet it was, but they've regathered their numbers quite a lot from when we last saw them.
Yeah, they sure have. And it's exactly like what you said, Catherine. It doesn't feel like they're in a catacomb way down under the ground. It feels like they're kind of out there and people know who they are. And so it does feel very different. Being a child of the Watch or being involved with the Watch now has a bit more of an international flair. People will see you more. And the armor is so stuck on keeping that helmet on. But she's willing to be flexible, I guess, because Mando has debunked a bunch of stuff I think she thought was set in stone, that, perhaps the Mandalorians wouldn't have their day out in the sun again, so to speak, and a lot of other things in addition to getting the Darksaber. So I think that because he has that, I don't think in a million years she would have guessed that he would have possessed that. She knows how to wield it. And I hope this season we do finally get a chance to find out who she is, because she knew how to use it, Catherine. And we haven't seen a lot of people in current day who know how to use it. Gee, she might be the only person who knows how to use it, Catherine. That is kind of rare. Maybe Luke could use it. Who knows? But the point is, does he have more street cred too, because he has that Darksaber anyway, even though he's not a leader?
You see, that's the thing. It's like he has the saber, but she's like, oh, you're not a Mandalorian. So I would think, given how set in their ways the armor and her sect are, that they would be like offended at the idea that somebody who's not a Mandalorian still has the Darksaber. It's like, I figured she would challenge him. I mean, granted, you did have that bit in season 2 where what's his name did challenge Din for the Darksaber and lost.
Vizsla, yeah.
Right, but I figured they would, now that they have a whole bunch of them there, it's like maybe they just didn't challenge him in that moment out of respect because he saved him from the water monster. But still, for 2 years to have gone by, nobody's tried finding it, and it's like, really? Because you guys seem really, drunk on your own Kool-Aid to the point that you would probably, want to have this thing back. So, yeah. But yeah, he definitely does have more street cred since he has it.
Yeah, and I think that she yielded at the end, because I thought she was going to say, well, it's gone, you can't do it. But she was like, this is the way. And I'm like, yeah, I guess she doesn't have any recourse to this. But I also get a feeling she knows more again, Catherine, and is holding back from Mando. Oh my gosh, I wish she would stop doing that, but I guess you know how it goes. She is purposefully keeping information from him. So be it. It is what it is. And then as Mando decides that he's going to go on this journey, I think the episode is called Apostate. Making it feel as if he has something to atone for, or whatever it is. We notice that he is teaching Grogu how to fly, and we're not talking about this song. This is for real, or be a Mando, or be something. I mean, what do you think Grogu will become in this season? Because we can't just see him sitting around in his pram anymore, can we?
No, but he's still, for 2 years having passed, it doesn't feel like he's gotten any older, like mentally speaking. He still seems to be a baby, which I thought was kind of surprising, because when you do the math and think about how old Yoda was 900, and you think about the aging of his species, like, well, now the math doesn't add up anymore. It's Disney just trying to keep him a baby because it's cute and it sells toys. But as far as what they're going to do, I would think that I would expect him to start using the Force more often, which we see a little bit in this episode. It's not just in times of stress. Now he's using it like for his own little fun, just whenever he wants to use it. And so I take it that I think he's going to once again step up and save him from something. I'm not sure if the big thing that everybody put their money on this season was that Grogu was going to speak for the first time, but I don't know, because he doesn't seem to have been any older, so maybe not.
He doesn't seem like he even wants to, honestly, Catherine. I don't feel like it's there yet. Perhaps as the character grows in the season, we may find that he has the desire to do it. And I think that he has to want to do it, since he's been getting by without needing it. So there's no purpose of using it. He can do things that other people can't. So there's no point for him to do it.
Plus, his interactions with that little guy you have there shows that he's still very much a baby and not really matured 100% yet.
Yeah, I certainly was very surprised, and that's why I brought him, because a friend of mine gave me this. He is Babu Frick, for Christmas a few years ago, and I had him on the shelf. I've never even taken him out of the box, and then seeing the Anzelians out, working their magic on the droids was a lot of fun. Honestly, Catherine, their little niche, if you will, it can't be that little though, right? Because they're working on full-size droids. So it's very deceptive what kind of setup they have, but they're geniuses in making droids come alive and fixing them. And boy, that really bothered me. But it felt like, have you ever had a friend who has a kid and they go and they try to pick up a cat, and, the cat's like, no, you're not picking me up. No, you're not doing this.
Well, I like how they also don't immediately draw your attention to it. Like, you see Grogu climbing up the ladder. It's like, I know where this is going. And you see that wide shot of Mando, and you see how crunched he is inside that place, and how Grief Karga is even translating things that don't need to be translated, because they do speak a little bit of English, of Galactic Basic, but he's like, you can't fix it. It's done. If you get a new part, he'll try and do it for you. I'm like, okay, it was funny.
Well, it is very funny because, to be honest with you, when he talked about resurrecting IG-11, I understood what he was trying to do. But Catherine, I got scared to bits when I saw how IG-11 virtually almost tried to kill them. And he wasn't even full IG-11. This is just like partial IG-11, a very powerful form of technology. And it made me wonder whether Grogu's going to be faced with this his whole life. Whenever something reverts back to the original order from the Empire, that his life is in danger. My goodness, what a way to live for Grogu. Is that going to be happening to him? Is he going to, his whole life going to be that type of experience?
I don't think so, because I feel that would be going back to that well too many times. And as far as we knew, IG-11 was the only droid sent after him, because, well, granted, there might be other assassin droids out there, we don't know. But I thought it was interesting that would be his default setting, because that suggests that he was built for that specific purpose, as opposed to having been given that order at some later date. So it's kind of interesting that he reverted to that in particular. And I was like, okay. And I like how how the Mando's just shooting and it's not doing anything, and he picks up the kid and it's like, grief, and throws him across the room. And just the understated humor of, the fact that the protocol droid ends up saving the day by just pushing over the gold bust. And that whole bit too, how Grief Karga is so much vainer than he used to be. He's got the little droids holding his robes. He keeps insisting people call him the High Magistrate, and he has the gold bust. And I love how they don't deliberately draw your attention to it. It's just kind of this understated humor. You just see it in his character, and it's so funny. And how Navarro just keeps changing every time we see it. It's getting more and more like completely just totally redesigned each time. Like it's becoming like its own little metropolis of sorts.
It really looks great, right? I mean, I of course, I can see the brochures, get a place in Navarre for the low 700s. It's totally been rebranded. He tried to sell him a little. He said, you can hang up your saber and live just live off the land. And I loved seeing those. I don't know what Salacious Crumb is. I don't know what kind of creature he is.
Oh, he's a Quokian monkey lizard.
I loved seeing how they were in the tree, just hanging.
And you could tell they were like, some of them were like actual puppets. You could tell from the way they were moving, and it's like, man, that looks so cool.
Yeah, I just like the idea of them being just free and enjoying themselves rather than being in cages, which is how we often see a lot of them.
Well, that's how we saw them in that same street back in season 1, ready to be roasted on a spit, and now they're like all free and happy in the trees.
It is very different to see that, and of course they did, drop Cara Dune's name, the name that I guess that shall not be said. No one was quite sure how they were going to figure out where she was. She's special forces. Certainly something to think about. We just don't know where.
I like that she got the promotion though. That's neat because definitely if you're and it also confirms that she's the one who was allowed to bring in Moff Gideon, who of course he's going to be back at some point. But I like the idea that she got a big promotion out of that. That was cool.
I agree. She certainly earned it. And being a marshal on that planet is not something that is going to necessarily do anything for her. I see her being a leader, going further, even higher, doing even better. And something, it is really interesting, when those pirates show up and Grief Karga is like, come at me, bro. Like, I just love how his attitude is, because he's still got that attitude. I made me wonder, are bounty hunters down and out since Navarro's gone legit?
Well, that's kind of what I thought the conflict was really about. It wasn't so much that the bounty hunter the pirate was being stubborn about wanting a drink in the old bar. It's that he's like, hey man, you used to pay us for jobs in this place, and now you've turned it completely topsy-turvy, and you're standing here all elegant and all that, and him wanting a drink in that bar is more of him challenging Grief, like, hey man, remember who you are, like who you really are, like this is just you dressing up all fab because you have the ability to. But he's like, hey, this ain't who you are. And it's like a like a cockfight, if you will. It's like or a chicken fight. Like, come on, like even the pirates basically daring him to come at him. And of course, with Mando standing there, that it's a dumb idea.
Absolutely. I mean, if he hadn't been there at that moment, what would have happened? I think that Grief Karga would have, knocked them all out to oblivion, because I'm sure he's very badass and everything like that. But he doesn't want to get his hands dirty anymore. So, he offers this job to Mando. And I think you and I both know that Mando's not going to be the one to get that job. But I think it is also very interesting that they still need somebody to defend Navarro, and Navarro's kind of wide open. And oftentimes that means that they're very vulnerable. It looks like you have this false sense of security, which really isn't there. And so,
yeah, which makes you think that now that it's a legit place, that wouldn't they have enough commerce to hire one of the old bounty hunters who used to be there all the time to be their lawman or something, But it seems like Grief is trying to separate himself from that whole crowd.
Yeah, that's a past he doesn't want to identify with, and never happened to him. Sorry, but he doesn't go by that name or number anymore. And one incredible thing we saw, at least I thought it was incredible, and I think a lot of people thought it was incredible, was of course when Mando, who is now teaching Grogu everything. And I guess if Mando teaches him for the next 50 years, Grogu can obviously benefit from anything he has to teach him about making his way in the universe and always knowing how to navigate things. Something that I thought was absolutely fascinating were the Purgles we saw when Grogu was looking in hyperspace. Now, Catherine, was Grogu the only person who notices this? What do we know? Because we've seen these creatures, of course, in Rebels, since they helped Ezra get on out of there, pretty much saved the day even. What do we know about them appearing in it is hyperspace, right? I mean,
yeah, because the Purgle are able to jump to hyperspace. So this is the first time they've actually shown, like, the fact that he sees it, and then they cut to that super wide shot where he's like basically Moby Dick, and you have like 5 or 6 of them there. But when he crawled back into the front cockpit with Mando, I kind of thought that Mando might have been asleep because his head was kind of down and the kid's kind of moving around in his hands and he's kind of not like responding at all. So maybe he noticed him or maybe not. I mean, it's now that, they had the opportunity to bring the Purgle into live action, which is something that still feels a little too weird for me, that an animal has the ability to go to hyperspace. It's like, really? It was like, okay, but I get that was a neat little nod. Kind of like how they decided to take the IG-11 statue, which in season 2 was almost out of focus, way over in the corner, and then they made it such a central focus of this episode. Bring it back, and like when they brought in the Babu Frick's people and that kind of thing.
Yeah. No, you're right. We are seeing a lot of familiar faces coming back this season. And so the thing that I thought was very interesting about the hyperspace thing is I do also wonder whether Mando has seen it, but he just ignores it, like it's a little anomaly or something. I'm not even quite sure what people see. I don't know what the norm, I don't know what the baseline for what you see in hyperspace is necessarily, because of course we don't do it. And I don't believe that there is anything kind of written down. As you said, this might be the first time they've ever showed us it. We know what it looks like.
Right, because when it happened for the first time in Rebels, it surprised everybody. Like they had no idea there were these creatures which could do this. So it doesn't sound like the Purgle's existence is common knowledge at all.
Exactly. And so, I think it was very interesting to see that because I was just so mystified. We knew they could do it. It's just that this is the first time we kind of see them kind of hanging out there. And they essentially were Rebels is an animated series. So are they going to look exactly the same way they did in Rebels? Are they going to have this really incredible glowy look? Like, what will they look like when they do finally reemerge? And where will they reemerge, since it seems like the galaxy is their oyster?
I would hope they use like maybe actual puppetry, kind of like I think the closest thing we've seen to it would be the Exogorth on the asteroid in Empire Strikes Back, because that's another creature living in the vacuum of space type thing. So maybe it could look real like that.
And the fight with the pirates, it was okay. I don't think it was necessary. I'm not even quite sure what function it showed.
I am pretty sure that because Mando warned Grief, you sure you want to let the leader go? And he's like, yeah, he's going to tell everybody else this place isn't open for business. And I'm thinking, or he's going to tell everybody, hey, this guy's a dick, let's attack, because, and now that Mando has sort of made an enemy of the pirate leader who had a very unique seaweed monster type design, it's like, I have a feeling that this is going to be one of those subplots that's going to come back, kind of like with Trapper Wolf and those guys in the earlier seasons, where it's kind of like a cameo, and it's like, what does this mean? And it came back in season 2 to actually help them. So I think you might be seeing the beginnings of something like that with these pirates.
Yeah. And, so we'll see what happens with them. And as I said, ever since Navarro's gone legit, they've lost a lot of money, and I guess they feel like they have to come in and get some money back. I had no idea, because it's very interesting, because when we first are introduced to the Mandalorian, we find out, honestly, as he goes to Grief, that there isn't a whole bunch of business and money out there, and that people are fighting over jobs. So it is very interesting. Maybe the jobs were becoming scarcer and scarcer. I don't know. But it is kind of interesting to look at it from that point of view, because the pirates didn't look like they were doing that bad. That ship was huge, Catherine. It certainly isn't cheap to operate, and I think they're doing well. Why isn't he on Tatooine, where the underground is? So maybe the underground is somehow affected and he can't go back there. Maybe Boba Fett did do something that stopped what's going on there. So
that's really, because that 2-year thing you mentioned, it's like, man, that does create a lot of questions and a lot of problems, so to speak. Is like, what have you been doing for the last 2 years, Mando? Why have you taken 2 years before even seemingly beginning this quest to return to Mandalore? Because they seem to be on board with the Armorer's assignment to go to Mandalore, and now here we are 2 years later, and he still hasn't gone. But he apparently went somewhere, because he got that green crystal with the writing. So I take it we're going to find out more about that.
Well, I believe, and this may not be true, I believe that he's been going through the galaxy looking for other Mandalorians. And I think that, even if he spent a year or a year and a half doing this, while he was doing that, he was showing Grogu how to navigate the galaxy. And Grogu, I don't, we know he was in the temple, but I really don't know what kind of galaxy experience he's had other than being on the run, which is very different than, showing somebody how to get to, an outpost A to outpost B, what you do when you get there and how. And I think Grogu pushed one of the buttons, right, with his little hand. So he wants him to be able to fly that plane. We know he can do it. It's just that this is going to be a very different experience for him, even though, he could still crash the plane, I guess, if he's not careful.
So, I did hear that they're supposedly going to reveal who saved Grogu from the temple this season. And I take it that's going to also dovetail into telling us where he was during the course of between episode 3 and, the Mandalorian. Because I have a feeling that whoever saved him, given he was a baby, didn't just like dump him off somewhere,
Yeah, I agree. I think that they've been hinting at it so many times. How many times do we have to see those lightsabers and those giant eyes? It's like, and his little scared face. And if they don't show it to us, shame on them for doing that. Now, it's interesting because at some point, Mando ends up going to Bo-Katan, and Catherine, I don't know why he went to her, but he was showing, Grogu, this is a Mandalorian palace. And when he gets in there, boy, Bo-Katan is down and out. This chick is broken. She looks sad. Will they, in this season, give her Mandalorian mojo back, Catherine?
Yeah, I think so. But I was very surprised to learn that when she says that the Mandalorians basically left when she didn't get the Darksaber. And I'm like, it seemed like the people she was running with were a lot more passionate than to just give up because they don't have the sword. It's like, really? And how she's just kind of, depressed, just kind of lying about. And it's like he came to her with something, this crystal thing, and he's telling her he's going to Mandalore, and he even calls her out on it. It's like, you said the curses were superstitions yourself, then why are you afraid to come? And it's almost like she's withholding something from him. And I'm like, you're clearly not doing anything else, so why not go with him, It's like, plus he has the Darksaber. You might have an opportunity to challenge him or get it back. Like, why is she just like... So I feel there's got to be more to that story than her just kind of... Because it was kind of, in a sense, a pointless scene. It was just us checking in on her just for her to say that her troop is gone. Even though we never really got to see her whole group. We only ever saw that Cusker Reeves and, the other guy that was with her. We never got to see the rest of them. So it's just a very odd type of revelation, if you will, that over the course of these 2 years, her movement is just, dissipated.
Well, the only other Mandalorian-like person that's ever been honest with Din has been Boba Fett. He hasn't lied to him and has told him, this is why the armor is mine. And, kind of, they're very chatty, so to speak, in the sense of being sort of on the same level, in the sense of maybe being too somewhat of an outcast members of what appears to be Mandalorians, because even though Boba Fett's like, I'm not a Mandalorian, I'm like, no, you kind of look like one, bro. Have you looked in the mirror? You kind of are like one. And when we think about a Mandalorian, you're what pops in the head. So I think it's very interesting for that. But I also think what's interesting is that we finally are seeing something that's very disturbing for Bo-Katan. And I don't know whether this is true or not, but, why doesn't anybody have Bo-Katan's back? It's not that she's destitute. I'm just saying that it doesn't feel like she has people who are on her side. To be honest with you, it shouldn't matter whether she has the Darksaber or not.
Right.
Why aren't they on her side? After all, she blamed the Children of the Watch and these other factions for the demise of Mandalore, but she was also in a faction that definitely added to the demise of Mandalore. Even someone could argue even to the death of her own sister.
Yeah, of course she's not going to blame herself for that. Typical, people will do, they'll throw around the blame, play the blame game. But like you said, it's the idea that everybody gave up just because she didn't have the sword. To me, that suggests that maybe the other factions haven't forgiven her for her past discretions, and maybe she wasn't as much of a leader. It's like, yes, she has the fire in her and the passion to do it, but maybe they just weren't satisfied with her leadership capabilities unless she had the Darksaber, I guess. But even then, it's like, well, they were still willing to follow her when she didn't have it. So Like, there's got to be more to the story. Her place just looks like a ghost town. And it's like, dude, you're not doing anything else. Just go with him, you know?
Yeah, and I know it's not like Darth Vader's place, but it felt like it. I mean, I know it's kind of weird, but boy, it felt very kind of somber and, as if she regretted her decisions. It was almost, like very eerie. It didn't feel like a palace should. Boy, it
That's why I
reminded
think
me.
that's why I think she's lying. That's like it can't be that simple that they just, oh well, they just gave up because we didn't have the sword. It's like, well, you didn't have the sword the first time when you were going after it and they were still following you. So I'm wondering if whatever happened to them may have something to do with how Mando came by this crystal. Because that is like, because it's surprising, because it's a mystery, but they didn't really frame it as such. Like, if you didn't know any better, you might think that you missed some piece of information earlier on. So I think that's going to play back into whatever's going on with Bo-Katan, because that really doesn't track what's going on with her.
Yeah, and I'm sure somebody, whoever you are out there, I'm sure there is someone who has deciphered what it says on that crystal in Mandalore, in Mandalorian. Whoever you are, thank you for doing that. But and then maybe we'll know what it says. But I thought it was very interesting. The Jawas had the crystals, and the Jawas seem to have a lot of really cool artifacts. They just hold on to stuff forever. They deal in it and everything. But I think he's been searching. This is maybe the second thing that Din has been doing for 2 years is, one, look for Mandalorians, but the second thing is look for any sign that there might still possibly be an existence of or some legitimate place to go to in Mandalore itself, or the planet surrounding Mandalore, or some kind of place to go to. And so we did see like a hint where he finds a Mandalorian helmet in the sand, but it wasn't very much there. And it does make you wonder, what is going to happen in this season. But I don't think, I know it seems to make sense that Bo-Katan wants to be the person who challenges Din to this, but I still think it's going to be Paz Vizsla, because he's the only real one who's ever challenged him. Even though Paz has kind of saved him, it feels like he's the only one that would responsibly take on the leadership role
Right.
and be capable of doing it. I mean, yeah, Tom, I'm hoping someone did decipher that, what it says, Tom. Someone probably has, but I didn't look it up. But honestly, Catherine, I don't see the armorer doing it. She's way too like secular. She's very
Yeah.
she's not as flexible. But Paz seems, this thing about Paz, and of course you guys know he's the heavy Mando, is that, as I said, he knew what the Darksaber was. He kind of like tried to fight him for it. He gave him a legitimate fight. I mean, Mando ended up burning himself, I think, or something.
But he also is the only one who has like a blood right to claim it, and he clearly has the passion to lead the people, because he took it really personally that Din Djarin wasn't acting like a true Mandalorian either. So I picture that he should be the one because everybody says that Mando is going to end up on the throne of Mandalore, but he hasn't had much character. He has a lot of character growth in the first 2 seasons in terms of being like this brainwashed cult member to being more of a regular guy. But I think a lot more has to happen before he decides that he would be the one to sit on that throne. And again, I don't see how that's going to be reconciled as long as Paz Vizsla is around. He's going to want it. And I think Mando is eventually going to come to realize that maybe they should have it. But we'll see.
Yeah, it is something to think about. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't think Din really is even going to be involved in that. I think what he is going to be involved is trying to figure out if he is going to still be a member of the Watch. I think that's what's going to happen. And if he decides that he's going to be still a member of this obscure faction, which they do feel that way, they don't feel.
Yeah, because he hasn't really run into any other Mandalorians from that specific faction in the series yet. It's like, where are the rest of you?
Yeah, and if it feels like, in fact, the other day I was thinking to myself, well, I know that there's a bunch of some of the clans. I know Clan Ren, Vizsla, obviously. I'm assuming there's Bo-Katan. Her last name is Katan, right? So, or is it? Am I incorrect?
No, Bo-Katan
Kryze. So
Kryze.
is it Clan Kryze or something like that?
Yeah, I think it's Clan Kryze because she's part of the same family as Satine.
Mhm.
that whole dynasty.
And there's definitely some of those guys left around, I'm sure. So I kept trying to think of how many clans, just that I knew from Rebels or from Clone Wars that we saw. Obviously, there's Djarin and Fets. I don't think there are any Fets left, but my point being that you mentioned Vizsla has direct line or claim to everything, and maybe this will be the point where they decide to separate the possession of the Darksaber and not have that be the complete determining factor as to who rules, because the promise of it is just not something that I think will even come to fruition or get to its apex in this generation. Maybe in Grogu's generation we'll get that promise, but I just don't see it happening. So about the only other thing that I had a question about was, and if it is true that it's been 2 years since he saw Luke, it's been a while since that message was sent out at Tython, and we did hear from Ahsoka that it would be any Force user who got the message. And I wondered if that was something that would ever come to play about it, because obviously it was Luke who answered the call, but I wondered if there was going to be any other Force users, because we know they're out there. It's just that they're not in one central location. So, I did kind of wonder, was it possible for there to be another Force user out there who would be looking for Grogu, and why would they be looking for that? Now, yeah, this episode was one of the shorter episodes that we've had. And even with that, we had a little bit of filler, but it is what it is. What did you think overall of the episode?
I thought it was kind of a filler episode because, again, if it's been 2 years, they don't really make that clear. They don't really tell you what he's been up to. And he just goes to the armor basically to say hi, goes to see Grief basically to say hi, and then goes to Bo-Katan basically to say hi, with a little adventure with some pirates in the middle. And it's like, for a series that only has 8 episodes per season and with as much time passing between seasons, it's like, maybe I'd be a bit more careful with what I spend the runtime on, because I do in a sense feel lost. It's like, where'd you get this crystal? Why are we not establishing the mystery of this up front? Why are we not establishing that a bunch of time has passed, and why, like, where has he been? It's just kind of bizarre that they're not addressing this stuff up front, and it just felt like in a sense like filler, because he's just going around checking in on people. It's like, here's a tour of who you'll be seeing throughout the season.
It is somewhat that way. And to be honest with you, I know that he has this goal in mind to bathe in the waters, and that will help him to become a Mandalorian again. But like I said, I somehow, as people start these, it's like a documentary. You start off thinking your documentary is going to be about one thing, but by the end, I have a feeling that becoming a member of the Watch will not be the focus for Din Djarin after this. I think he's going to discover some other things, maybe even about his own, let's say, clan that are incredibly important. And I guess worst case scenario is that the Watch might have been the ones who kind of were the strongest party and really hurt all the other ones. So that's maybe why they kind of hid out after everything was done, after the fall of Mandalore. So that's just my thoughts. I don't know if it's true or not. They certainly did have, some of them have the upper hand. And if the armorer is, wearing a Darth Amirian, helmet like that, maybe she was also a member of Death Watch, which it was Death Watch, right?
Death Watch were the ones during the Clone Wars who were on the adjacent moon who wanted to return Mandalore to their warrior ways, and teamed up with Darth Maul to stage the coup against Satine.
Mm-hmm. And so I think, perhaps that she might have been part of that. I don't know, but I think they need to.
The Death Watch didn't have the issue about removing helmets. They did that all the time, and it wasn't really an issue. Like, Pre Vizsla would take his helmet off and greet people. It was never a thing. Whereas for her, like you mentioned earlier, she's secular to the point that she says, you're not a Mandalorian of any kind if you take off your mask. It's like, well, what about all the other clans which do that and don't have that issue? Well, she's kind of, she's in a sense that little offshoot cult, if you will. Like, even the way, if we remember how Bo-Katan and Koska Reeves and the other guy first greeted Mando when they realized he insulted them right when he saved them because they don't have their masks on. They're like, he's one of them. And so I don't know if that, so maybe, because at first I thought, well, is Children of the Watch meaning the Children of the Death Watch, or is that a different watch? Because again, Death Watch doesn't have the hang up about helmets like the armor and her sect clearly do. So
Yeah, and that is something to think about going forward in this. There's always been a lot of rivalry between the clans, but now what we're seeing essentially is a very pivotal point as far as I'm concerned. Maybe you are very correct about Bo-Katan pretending to be alone and trying to lure in Din Djarin, making him think that she's vulnerable when she's not. He certainly doesn't have the intel or anybody telling him what's going on. And I think over the 2 years, Catherine, I almost think he should have that. Is he incredibly deficient for someone who's so well traveled in the galaxy with incredible skills? Or, or is Mando okay? Do you think they should have presented somewhat more wiser Mando at this point?
perhaps, because the other thing which may be going on with Bo-Katan is that maybe they deserted her because of her own character flaws, and she's just flippantly saying that, oh no, it's because I didn't have the sword. But him, again, like you mentioned, like if has he been looking for Mandalorians this whole time? Like, where did he get the crystal from? And why is he still like? On the one hand, Grogu kind of helped purge his super strict cult-like attitude, but he clearly still values the armorer's opinion because he still wants to go bathe in the waters and all of that, even though he's since become friendly with other Mandalorians who don't have that hang up. So it's like, I think you're right. I think he's going to have an arc which is going to change his mind on some of those things. And it would help to just kind of, and you can tell the fact that he's trying to actively teach Grogu more stuff means he's sort of stepping up to being more of a fatherly type role now that the kid is back. Like even when Grief Karga addresses him as the kid, and he's like, his name is Grogu. And then when he mentions it again, he's like, no, it's Grogu. And he's like, okay, he's kind of being more protective about it. So there's some character growth there.
Yeah, that is very true. So, unusually, I'm not quite sure what's going to happen in the next episode. I feel quite in the dark, and I don't always feel that way about an upcoming episode for this show. I just really don't even understand what would be the next step for him because it doesn't feel as pinpointed as it should for me. But I really enjoyed this episode. I felt that it was an okay first episode, but I also think that we might even be at a point in the series where they could have given us 2 or 3 episodes for the first week.
I wonder if he might go straight to Mandalore, because that's what he told Bo-Katan as he left. He's like, well, I'm going. And it's like, you can come or you can stay. And she decides to stay. So I wonder if, because we saw Mandalore in the trailer, so maybe he's going there next week.
I hope so, because it would be nice to see it. Will this be the first time we see Mandalore in live action, Catherine?
Yes.
Yeah, this is going to be incredible. I think Mandalore is, I don't know, how do we even imagine it? I mean, I remember what it looked like in the Clone Wars, and it looked pretty cool. It looked like an amazing place with, Mandalorians flying around, whenever they need to go from to and fro. But to be honest with you, I'm curious as to what it's like now and what it must be like to live on if whatever remains are there. It's just so mesmerizing, but I feel like they could have thrown us a bone and said, oh, this is what we know right now about it. This is what it looks like right now. And then if he goes there and discovers more, that's great. But at least give us a baseline so we can kind of go in there thinking, well, the best intel tells us this. And then, we can kind of, judge what's going on versus him just showing up and you see a rock and you're kind of like, oh, he lands on the rock, but you don't really, I'm like, they should have added some kind of baseline for us, something we could kind of go throw a reference to, and then we could go from there. But let's see how the rest of this season plays out. I still think 1 or 2 episodes, 2 or 3 episodes and the beginning of this was kind of needed. It's been 2 years since we've really had this, series back in full play. And I think it would also give us an idea of different things. The final thing I was going to say is that one other thing that I'm hoping they do, and I did mention this to you before, is that now that when we see Grogu doing things, even though he is a child, it's like, I don't necessarily want to see, where somebody tries to bother him and he flips him away, I don't necessarily want to see every single use of the Force that he has like that. You mentioned that he's a more casual Force user, which is a good sign, but I also want to see his use of the Force have major consequences. And I think it would be very interesting that a profound character like Grogu, when he yields the Force in its most potent fashion, that there are huge consequences to it that shape history. And I think that would be, something that would kind of make that character feel a little bit more significant, in the sense that if he's going to do something, it has to be a major decision. It can't sort of be, I'm just going to decide to, use the Force on these controls and something will happen. No, it's going to change things around quite a bit. And I think that would be a very interesting twist on that character, but we shall see. So Catherine, where can people find you?
You can find me at Slice Night on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. You can find me on Facebook, and you can find me right now we're doing Tuesday nights on Fantasmagorium Show YouTube channel. We're doing Capes, Cows, Crusaders, review of all the Batman movies with Scotty R37. We just had our Dark Knight show last night, went for nearly 5 hours. That was fun. And then every second and fourth Sunday of the month, live stream at 8 a.m. Pacific, is the Unifying Force, a Star Wars talk show on the Virtual Cantina Network YouTube channel.
All right, that sounds fantastic, guys. Of course, you can find me right here on Positive Fandom, where we do all the parlay in the fandom. And you can find me on the Burnettwork, soon to be called Imagination Connoisseurs Unlimited, as well as streaming with Lorena Creole and sometimes a 1/6 scale Man Network, guys. So thank you all for joining us for this review, this spoiler review of Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 1. We sure did have a good time talking about what we think will be happening going forward. Guys, I hope you all are well out there. Thank you, Tom Jr. Jackson, my moderator, collaborator. We are all goof people. And for all of you out there, no matter where you are in the galaxy, always do remember to please be kind. Take care, everybody.